Yes, hello. I do want to preface this video with some disclaimers. All the stories that you're going to hear me tell about kids, their parents, whatever, and friends, um, are the names are made up. Okay. Now, they're made up not only for questions of privacy, but also dramatic effect. Some of these are many of these are just composite characters, both in the stories I tell and in the stories the kids write that I'll be reading from. And so when we get to those stories toward the end of this podcast, um, know that the kids themselves who wrote them, we consider these stories fiction. They're autobiographical fiction, but they are fiction. And that's as much for privacy as much as it is for dramatic effect in their writing. They use not only their memories, but their imaginations. So, with that said, uh, where the question used to be, how do you transmit knowledge? The cliche. How do you, what do children need to know? What do kids need to know? What does an educated person need to know? Okay. And then you supply it. Well, that didn't work for me. And I'm going to go in this video, I'm going to go into why. All right. I don't think it works for most kids. I think it removes them from themselves and therefore from their. So I came up with this theory that I did in my classroom when I've done with adults and teachers. The question is not what does the child want to know, but it's an important one. Okay. What the child needs or wants to know is unbelievably important. The question would be, how do you know what that is if you're a teacher? And how do they know what it is? Because if they haven't been doing that, they won't be able to do it. If you ask a kid in most high schools, for example, what they're interested in, they're going to end up raising their hand and saying math, English, history, or science. Okay, they're not going to know because they don't know who they are. So the bigger question, and this is important, the bigger question is, who are you? Who is this kid or this person or this teacher, if I'm working with teachers, in front of me? And how, as a teacher, do I help them to come out, to bring them out personally in every single way, emotionally, socially, cognitively, intellectually, creatively, artistically? Okay. And I know from experience that to be successful, you can't separate those things out. You can't put them in silos. All right. A person who's doing bad in math, it may not have anything to do with his math intelligence or skills. Okay. It may have everything to do with the kid sitting right next to him. And whether or not he's getting put down or it could have a million things it could have to do with. They go together. So to know who you are in the present, if you're a kid, you've got to go back and find out who you were. So you do have to do what I don't call it therapy, I call it art. You've got to go back. The themes that you have going for you are incredible. They're every theme an adult has just about. By the time you get in middle school, where you're both open and closed, which is why I like those kids so much, they're crazy. Okay. And uh, you've been through some kind of sexual experience, whether it's masturbation, whether it's just looking at pornography. A first kiss to a kid in middle school, in many of them, is the same thing as having your first intercourse 10 years later, 5 or 10 years later. Okay, it's the same feeling. Falling in love is the same feeling. Puppy love, regular love, a crush, it's all the same feeling. Whether you two even sit next to each other in class, the feeling's there. Okay. Death, death of a dog, death of a grandparent. You're going to have all these things about, um, especially the death of a loved one. That's a tough one. Okay. If it's a parent, you're going to feel responsible. Okay. Don't think I've ever seen it where I've talked to a kid about the death of a parent, and the kid would start off taking a whole lot of responsibility, talking about other stuff, babbling, being boring, frankly. You got to go through that stage. And I don't think I've ever uh, talked to a kid that ended up not saying, I killed her. Okay. The responsibility, and it's an incredible revelation. And that coming out with that feeling, here's what they learn from all these feelings. Uh, they learned that if you express that feeling, if you say it, okay, and you express it with feeling, you are suddenly together for the first time in your life in a long time, emotionally. And once you feel that feeling, it's scary as hell, and it's painful, and it's negative. All of them are going to be. Well, everything we're talking about. All right. But then you really feel good. Okay. It's like having a good, ugly cry. You feel good. You feel like laughing. You feel released. And so the biggest message I have is if you feel those feelings truly, they subside. It's like joy or candy bar or an ice cream cone. Yeah, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, joy doesn't last. Okay. So you're going to get back to these. So you go back to these. Maybe you feel guilty because uh, your grandparent died and you're 12 or 10. All right. And say it's a grandmother and y'all were really close and really intimate. Okay. And so you uh, you can't bring yourself to think about it. You can't even bring yourself to go to her funeral, and because you know you won't cry. You can't cry. You don't want to cry. You don't want to feel it. Okay. So you go to the funeral. Everybody else is crying. She's trying to fake the crying. Okay. She wants to be like everybody else, but she can't feel it. She's too scared. Now that means here's what she leaves that funeral with. And this is horrible to me. What she leaves the funeral with is, I don't love my grandmother. I thought I did. Okay. Tell me about it. Write it. Let's see what happens. And this whole story, and of course, then her memories come back. The the love comes back. And she realizes at the end that she couldn't cry. Not because she didn't love her grandmother, but because she loved her so much. She couldn't take it. So once that comes out, that child before you has learned something really important. It's really important. First of all, she gets rid of the guilt that she's capable of love and she got thwarted in it. Everybody gets thwarted in it one way or another. You get a humiliated, a little boy gets humiliated playing with dolls in preschool. Okay. And suddenly you see him, this little old Twinkie thing, and you see him in middle school um, calling everybody a fag at recess and going out for football. Okay. When he has no interest in it, whatever. All right. Not that gay kids or whatever, bisexual could not, they can. But this one, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's a stereotype. Okay. He's brilliant in math. He loves manipulating things. He loves music. Okay. No, no music. That's for girls. Okay. All right. So what has happened is you get the kids together. You know this is going on. You hear it, you listen. And you listen in a way that most teachers don't listen. Most people don't listen. You listen to what you don't want to hear. You listen to what they don't want to tell you. You listen to the silences. What are the possibilities here? What's the story? Nobody hardly ever comes up with the story right off the bat. None of us do. Okay? You have to work at it. All right. So what you find out in his story is, frankly, this took place, this was intimacy. This took place with the whole class. They often did it together, but they knew each other and learned the intimacy and learned the respect. And So you go through, what he realized is that when he played with dolls in preschool, the uh, boys and some of the girls humiliated him. And he didn't want to admit there was anything wrong with him, so he didn't stop. He kept going. All right. Uh, and um, this story actually, one in particular, is coming into focus here. And so we're talking about it. And the kid says, I'm afraid I'm gay. Well, what do you think happens in that classroom with 13 and 14-year-olds? Boys' hands shoot up all over the place. Okay. Yeah, I saw that athletic guy, that pitcher for the Yankees, in his underwear the other day, and I thought, oh, backed up. They're all, half of them were afraid they were gay. Now, does that mean they are? Does it mean they're not? It doesn't mean anything. It does for this kid, and it probably will for a few of them. All right. Now, it could be what makes, if the kid's playing basketball, what makes him afraid to take the shot with the game on the line? What makes him, an even better one, not want to throw it to the kid who can make the shot with the game on the line? What kind of envy, jealousy, which is all over the place in there? Anytime you hear kids say uh, they drifted apart, they were close friends and they drifted apart, what it means is they betrayed. One betrayed the other, and they usually did it for what they call a more popular group. Now that becomes a big theme right there. That's social status. That's that's the right T-shirt, the right sneaker, the right neighborhood for the adult. It's the Mercedes, the house in the right neighborhood, status, money, respect. Okay, whether if it's an academia, it's a different kind of respect. It's all the same thing. It's status. It's not intimacy. That has nothing to do with intimacy except for one thing. If you like these kids, and we are, you're avoiding the intimacy. That's why you're seeking that status. That's why you're seeking to be the big. It's great. You want to be great. But when the envy comes in and the jealousy comes in, what else comes in? Destructive put downs. Okay. How about this? Uh, your jump shot needs work, or your art sucks, or this drawing has a real problem. So she calls him in for a conference. That's what they do. Okay. And she says, that hurt my feelings. Why did you say it? It makes me want to kill you. Okay. And he is sitting there and he's got to admit it. There's no way he can say that was constructive criticism. So then we get to the theme of an unsolicited criticism, constructive criticism, if there's such a thing. So why did he do it? Okay. It certainly wasn't to help her jump shot or to make her drawing better. That's what he's going to say. I thought it would be helpful to you to know that. It was constructive criticism. Okay. Well, bullshit. And that's what she's going to say to him. All right. Now, if she doesn't say it to him, then we have to work on why she can't. What is it she's feeling that keeps her from being honest with him? If she doesn't think it's bullshit, fine. Did she need the help? Did it help her? Blah, blah, blah. Go through the whole story, his and hers. All right. So then you come out and uh, uh, he says, I remember one, you were vulnerable. I did it because you were vulnerable. I could see it. You were vulnerable in the art room and you were vulnerable on the basketball court. Well, something happened with this kid where she went from being passive and defeated and hurt and somewhat angry to all of it sheds away. And she looks at him across the table and she says, well, let me ask you this, you little son of a bitch. Am I vulnerable now? And that did it. That kid learned what it meant to be a bully. He learned what envy, he learned about jealousy. He had a story. What made him the way he is? Who criticized him unmercifully? Who put him down unmercifully? When did it happen? What's his story? What's her story? I'm going to show you what can happen briefly with kids. And this doesn't have to be creative writing and literature. You read a book like you read the room. If you can't do that, reading the book, if literature is nothing. Okay. So I'll give you an example. We're reading a book called A Day No Pigs Would Die by Robert Newton Peck. Okay. It's a great book for junior high kids. There's always some very bright, academic, articulate kid in the classroom who will answer rationally about something, and it'll be a bunch of shit. Sometimes he answers great. Okay. He's like anybody else. That's his way of being pedantic and avoiding, whereas somebody else's way may be something else, emotional. They can't do it. All right. So, oh, hell, I got an even better one than that. How about this one? If Holden Caulfield were in my classroom, that's your classic American teenager at their worst. Okay. Negative, cynical, won't do his work, doesn't want to go to class, makes fun of anybody who does, puts everybody down, has something cynical and very funny to say about just about everybody, so he gets away with it. All right. The kids are laughing. They love this kid. We all feel those ways, cynical and so forth, and think it's funny. All right. And one kid looks up and she says, he's boring. I'm bored with this book. Everybody loves the book, just about. Everybody. They're happy with it. It's happy. It's free. Yeah, look at the fun everybody's blah, blah, blah. All right. He makes fun of the football team. It's terrific praying. All right. Um, uh, she says, he's boring. And I said, the book is boring? She says, yes. All he does is put people down. Well, that's what she did. Okay. If they say the book is getting boring because the story is what's the word? The story is not plotted well. They won't use that word, but what have you. All right. There's not a storyline that runs through it like with other books. That's one thing. That can also be an excuse for the same thing. Usually when Simon and Lord of the Flies, okay, I can tell you the put down artists, the big ones, whether they're subtle and shy or overtly aggressive, are going to often think that book is funny until they realize, wait, I'm that way. Okay. When in the Day No Pigs Would Die, the kid is poor. So he cuts school. He's smart, but he cuts school. He doesn't have store-bought clothes. Okay. So his father is poor, country farmer, illiterate, but he wants him to go to school, and he's a good man. And so he tries to bribe him with a whistle, and he gets a twig of sumac, I think it is. And he says, reckon a boy with as fine a whistle as this might be willing to go back to school, wearing his clothes his mama made him. And of course, the boy said yes. Now, what's the reaction to that? The reaction to that is it's beautiful, right? It's loving. This is a good man. But some of the kids will say he's bribing him. It's very cynical. Why? Well, because they want the relationship with their fathers. And no matter how much money and what cars they drive and what else that this kid has with his. And they don't have it. They don't get the attention they need. So they put it down. Okay. So everything that is good or bad that's happening to somebody affects everybody else. In Lord of the Flies, the angel, the villain is Jack. Okay. And I remember the phrase, he had a sense of avoidance, intensity, and secretiveness about him. Naturally, he becomes a leader, the villain. Then you have Simon, who says to all of them, they're afraid. They become violent. Okay, they start killing and so forth. And One of the kids says, Simon says, it's fear. We're afraid. All right. When Simon says that, he becomes the angel in the book. Okay. He's the good kid. He's more pure. All right. Now, how does that other kids who are all after popularity, putting people down, kicking ass one way or another, embarrassing, whatever, what is their reaction to that? The villains can always recognize themselves and jump away from it quick and put down the good people. Okay? And everybody's both. Everybody's good. Everybody's terrible. That's all a mixture. So all of this begins to come out in the classroom. If a kid's writing a research paper, okay, even if it's academic, if he doesn't know why he's doing it and picking that topic, I can tell you in the long run, it'll break down at the end. All right. Uh, he may get an A if he's got a teacher who's just like he is, but that paper is not going to make it. All right. And so, with uh, uh, this whole thing affects reading, it affects writing, it affects speech making. You're running for office. Well, the kid running for office in our classroom, because we have a court system and a Congress, we're not dealing with sexual harassment outside the classroom. We're dealing with it downstairs where the lockers are, with what's happening in the classroom. Who is going to be the kid that says, and there's some groping, not terrible, but groping, junior high stuff. All right, who will be the kid who is totally against even a discussion about having a law against groping in the classroom? The one who's been abused and nobody knows it because she's in denial. Okay, if she's not in denial, it'll be different. But if most of them are in denial, she could be abused by an older brother, 7 years older, abused by somebody, whatever. All right. But that is the kid who's vulnerable. All right. And that is the kid who will come out. In order for her to be herself in that classroom and to know what she wants and to get it in that classroom or anywhere else, she has to go back. She has to realize that. Okay. She has to go back to the child she was. That's where the inner child thing comes in. Go back to that child she was who was abused. And she has to deal with that, feel that pain, and and then she will be totally against that harassment business. In other words, I'm jumping around, I know. It affects reading, it affects writing. And I want to show you three examples where it affects writing and show you what can happen when a personality comes through. What I hated about my own education was it had nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing. Nothing to do with my personality, which was really good. Okay. And um, so here's what can happen. Kids who say haven't written very much, I'm going to read you a couple of excerpts. All right. All right. This is a child who is coming to school with too much buttons unbuttoned up here, a little bit of too much cleavage. She's playing a game, okay? Wants the boys' attention and so forth. All right. So I talked to her about it. Okay. Often the kids like this will say, well, it's my body. I'm expressing myself. It's bullshit. Okay. Um, uh, so here's what the story reveals. And this is the first paragraph. This is a story about her and her dad. Um, her dad has left. That's the problem. Okay. All this is about her dad because the parents are getting divorced. All right. I was very little then when my father left, and my family was very happy. And because I was the oldest, I was known as the big girl. I loved that. When my friends of my parents visited, my father and mother would pat me on the head and say, "This is Betsy. She's the big girl in the family." And because I was the big girl on Sunday mornings, when my parents slept late, I'd get to go into their bedroom and chat with them while they had coffee in bed and read the newspaper. I got to do that because that's who I was. I was the big girl, the oldest of my brothers and sisters. So one Sunday morning, I walked into my parents' bedroom. It was funny. because they were laughing and screaming and giggling. It looked like they were wrestling or tickling you like they do to me when we were playing. But when I opened the door and they saw me standing there, they suddenly just looked shocked. Their faces were red as tomatoes, and covers and sheets went flying everywhere as they pulled them up. They looked so frantic. And my father kept reaching uncomfortably under the covers for something. And then they just lay there. They just lay there, their heads propped against the pillows, with these silly smiles on their faces, looking at me, just grinning. What were they smiling about? I knew, of course. They were just happy to see me. Okay, that you can't teach, that has to come from inside you. That has to come from you. The way you get there is you get to the right emotion. Who am I in this situation? You get to the right emotion, which is hard to arrive at because that's the truth. All right. And then you start your story. Well, the story before she writes it is one of loss, anger, separation, uh, 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 going about getting attention in the wrong way from boys, the whole thing. She starts the story because she starts from memory. She goes back and becomes that little girl. I'm going to give you another one here real quick. This is another one about divorce, actually. Well, I'll do it anyway. Okay, because it's a different kind. I need to accept and understand the divorce of her parents. She wrote that before the divorce, she would tell her friends their parents made her dust the entire living room for free, or that they gave her only 50 cents allowance. After the divorce, she told them that her mom made her at least eat at least one piece of lettuce at dinner, and that her dad made her say, "Excuse me," before leaving the table. So she's beginning to see, she wrote, mom is mom and dad is dad. They were slowly becoming, quote unquote, two separate people instead of one set of parents. The symbol of her former family life had been the lush, vivid vegetable garden from which on Sundays they picked fresh vegetables and made giant pots of spaghetti. Okay, now here's her writing. One day I was walking up the walkway, trying to avoid the cracks, when I saw a bright green weed twisting its way around a tomato plant. I almost started to cry on that sun-filled day, but I didn't. Instead, I walked quietly over to the garden and yanked the weed out of the ground, blaming it for the divorce, and remembering how the garden used to be weed-free. Days went by. Every time I looked at the garden, there were more and more weeds. Finally, the whole garden was only a mass of retired tomato plants and sad cucumbers. It was then that I actually realized that mom and dad were never going to be together, that our family was never going to be the way it used to be. Years passed, and the weeds took over our yard. Mom hired a few guys to fix the yard up. Just a few days ago, they planted grass over the old vegetable garden, over my mom and dad. Okay, now, again, a mass of retired tomato plants and sad cucumbers. This kid's 12 years old. All right. A sibling rivalry. I'm going to do it I'm going to try to read it fast. Okay. Every morning I have math at first period, which means I have to be at school at 8:30 or else I get a late mark. This is perfect for Susie, his younger sister, to get me back. She will get all ready for school by 8:15, except for her shoes and socks. Now, you may think that putting on shoes and socks takes 2 or 3 minutes. This is not any ordinary person putting on her shoes and socks. This is Susie. She can make the simple task of slipping on a pair of Nikes into a saga. First, there is finding the shoes. Sometimes I think Susie deliberately hides her shoes just to prolong the whole ordeal. Once they're found, she often realizes that her socks do not match her shoes, and she must change socks. By the time the socks are changed, it's about 8:25. By now, I'm becoming annoyed, only because I know her being slow is done deliberately to get me mad. But I try to show no emotion. None. In fact, I often drop hints like, "Thank God I don't have math this morning, so it doesn't matter if I'm late for school." Or I might say, I just love getting to school late. I love it. All right. Even if it's totally untrue, I hope maybe if she thinks I don't care about anything about getting to school late and what she's doing doesn't affect me in the least, then maybe she'll get ready quicker. But it never works. Sometimes I just relax on the sofa and watch TV and just make it look like I could care less. But it gets hard. It gets hard to control my anger. Next, Susie will completely unlace her shoes, take out the shoelaces, flatten them, press them to perfection, and slowly, in a snail-like fashion, replace the shoes, neatly and precisely. By this time, I'm getting angry, really angry. Susie finally places her left shoe on her left foot, tightens all of the laces, ties her foot laces in one knot, then another, then another, then another, then another, then another. She now has a quadruple knot, and her laces don't look like a bow, they look like some intricate macrame. Susie slowly repeats the same process for her right foot, yet slows down her steps just a little bit more. I begin dropping hints about there being a vegetable in the room and how I'd love to get to school for grammar class, sixth period. I asked my mom if she'll write a note to my teacher, Bernie, explaining why I missed a day of school. Dear Bernie, I'd say out loud, I'm sorry Joseph missed school on Tuesday, but his sister had to put on her shoes. Love, Nancy. Finally, Susie will get both her shoes on. Then she rolls down her socks, rolls them back up, rolls them back down, folds them over twice. Then Susie checks for errors. She sees none, and we're off to school at exactly 8:31. Okay? Now, again, you can see something, you can see the little innocent people they were before they were burned by whatever, a put down or harassment or failure or inadequacy or a feeling of those things, which we all have. Sibling rivalry is a huge one. All right. Uh, and uh, uh, and frankly, what's going on there is when this kid was born, okay, Joseph was probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years older. What does he do? Everybody's fawning over this little girl, and in his mind, all she can do is burp, fart, and laugh or whatever, sneeze. What's happened to him? What happened to his mother would read him stories every night. Where is she? With the bitch. Okay? Uh, she's favored. He feels, he doesn't say, this is fair. She needs more than me. He feels rejected and alone. And I'll tell you another thing he feels at that age, 5. He can feel like he's boring, uninteresting to his parents. That's when he begins to act out. That's when he began to probably piss off Susie all over the place later on. And then she comes back at him with this stuff. Okay. So what I'm saying is this, the relationships, you troll back through, you find your stories, you find them in these memories. And if you want to be a great reader, then, and you want to read the room and the person, you learn to listen in the same way you learn to read. And sometimes it's over and over. Sometimes you have to hear them over and over, like you would a poem, to really get it and understand it. To enjoy it, you have to understand it. Okay? And so the question became for me as a teacher, not what the child needs to know, though it's unbelievably important. Notice the books I picked out were perfect for their ages that I mentioned. Okay? It's who are they? Who is this child in front of me? And how do I bring him out, not just cognitively, but socially, emotionally, uh, creatively, artistically? How do I get him to be able to be intimate in one way or another? And if he can't do that, intimacy is the key. That's the key to creativity. It's the key to love. It's the key to intelligence. Otherwise, it ain't you doing it, and it's not going to work out in the end. It's like if I'm just making the grade, if I'm out to make money, I've had people who make money tell me this. If they're out to make money, they won't make it if that's the only reason. If I can tell you, if the kid is just in there for the grade and the SAT score, his story won't be worth shit. His poem won't be worth shit. And that research paper might get him into Yale or get him into whatever university he wants because those people have the same problem he hasn't overcome. It won't make it in the real world. And uh, um, and I will tell you how I learned this from my wife, Martha, that I learned there was something inside me that I could tap. Uh, and how I learned the opposite in school next time in part two, next time we talk. How's that sound?